Hey, welcome to Let's Unravel, and I'm your friend Christina. So, hot take. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie or is it not? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I'll let you know my thoughts at the end of this episode. So, thanks for stopping by. Whether you're a new listener or a friend of the show, I just wanted to say welcome. So, Unravelers. Okay, do you guys want me to call you that? I think I'll give it a try anyways. So, Unravelers. Your voice is needed here. You can join in on the conversation via Instagram or TikTok at Let's Unravel Podcast, or you can follow us along on our Facebook page at Let's Unravel Podcast. Your voice is needed here. We want to know about how you're winning throughout the week, win of the weeks, and we want to know your thoughts on what our topics are. And obviously, most importantly, we want to know what your answer is to the hot takes. I mean, after all, is Die Hard a Christmas movie? Because your opinions are the opinions that matter. Anyways, and not to mention, we also have short clips of the show, and any new big news announcement will be posted on all of our social media platforms, so you're not going to want to miss out on that conversation. Anyways, without any further ado, let's move into our favorite topic here at Let's Unravel, win of the week. So we have some exciting news here at Let's Unravel. We are officially on Pinterest. Now, you could be thinking, Christina, why is it such a big deal that we're on Pinterest? Well, Pinterest... Let's be real. Everybody is pinning stuff on Pinterest, whether inspirational quotes, whether it's the kitchen that you want or the dreams that you might have. Pinterest is very important. And that is why Let's Unravel is on Pinterest. We are going to be having all kinds of graphics from the show. Things like Never Say No and Pass the Buck are all different types of graphics that we're going to be having on Pinterest. And this way, as you find pieces of the show that you really like and maybe you find to be motivational, you can pin them to a special little board. This way, it's easier to find as you go back. And then as you realize, ooh, I like this clip of the show, you can pass it along to family members via Instagram and TikTok and, all those places. So we are now on Pinterest. You can find us there and feel free to pin whatever graphics that might inspire you. So, all right, let's move into our topic of the week. What are we unraveling today? Let's unravel diluting yourself. I have a little bit of a silly story as to how I came up with this whole episode concept today. So obviously it's called Diluting Yourself. And so I was sitting at my computer, I was editing a podcast, and all of a sudden something hit me where I'm like, you know what would make a really good episode? And all of a sudden I heard this phrase, nobody wants watered down apple juice. Now that sounds so silly. Nobody wants watered down apple juice. And it's funny because it made me think of this story when I was in the second grade. So I was I think I was 8 years old, and I had gone over to one of my friend's house. And so it was me, the friend's house I was at, and then there was another person. So there was 3 of us in total. And I remember when my mom had dropped me off and my mom talked to his mom, and his mom was like, oh, does Christina like apple juice? And she goes, oh, Christina loves apple juice. And I will say at 8 years old, I was an apple juice fiend. I loved apple juice. So we were outside, we were playing, and time went by, and all of a sudden my friend's mom comes outside and he goes, does anybody want apple juice? So of course we all scream, yes, we want apple juice. So we go running inside. He handed a cup of apple juice. I'm so excited to take a sip of the sweetness of apple juice. And what am I met with? This really disgusting tasting water. Honestly, that's what it tasted like. And I remember being like, this is not apple juice. I don't know what kind of apple juice his mom is buying, but this is not the apple juice that I'm used to having. And so it was so funny. I got into the car later that day. My mom's asking me how the play date went or the hangout or whatever you call it when you're 8 years old and you're hanging out at your friend's house. And I remember telling her all the important things of what games we played. And then finally I got to the point where I said, yeah, his mom gave us apple juice, but it was the weirdest tasting apple juice I ever had. It kind of tasted like gross water. And she goes, oh yeah, she asked me if it was okay if she watered down your apple juice. And I said yes. And I'm like, why would you ever say yes to that? Why? Why? I mean, I was used to drinking apple juice straight up. No rocks, no water. I mean, I was a pretty hardcore 8-year-old. I was drinking apple juice straight up from the time for my whole life, basically. So, but it was funny because as soon as I was thinking about that story, I started to think about that concept in a grander scheme of life of how many times do we water ourselves down? Or, we can use that fancy word of dilute. How often do we dilute ourselves so that we are more easily consumable for other people? It's funny when people dilute or water down things. The first time I was ever introduced to the word dilute, it was in science class. You have to dilute, I don't know, whatever you have to dilute in science class. Science was not my subject by any means, but you would dilute things in science class. And I just remember being like, okay, yeah, like that's important. Like you need that. Or, a lot of times like you think about almond moms who are the ones, watering down the apple juice. And those are instances where it's like, oh, I don't want my kid to have all this sugar and whatever the case may be. So you have these very reasonable reasons for why you're watering things down. But then you have these moments where you get to life and, I'm 28 years old. I've had a bunch of different experiences at this point in my life. And I think it's safe to say that at some point in time, we all kind of like water ourselves down to try to conform or try to fit or something. And if you haven't, congratulations, you are so much stronger than I am. And I don't mean that in a condescending way. I mean that in a genuine way. But there's just moments in my life, especially whether you're in high school and you want to try to fit in and have different moments. But like I said, how often do we try to water ourselves down so that we can fit or accept it into whatever the society is or whatever the friend group is that we want to be involved in? I thought that was something that really struck a chord with me. So of course, I would typically give you a definition for the word dilute, but you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to do the SparkNote version of a definition. So it's going to be Christina's SparkNote. And the meaning behind dilute is it just reduces, water down, or weakens. And so that's really what it is. And I think it's so interesting when you look at the word dilute and we think about it being reduced, we think about it being weakened, we think about it being watered down. And like I said, we talk about it from the perspective of how I was saying, like when I was younger, like when I was in high school or middle school, and how there would be times where I would try to reduce or water down my personality so I could try to fit into whatever the popular group was. And there's no better movie that really resembles this whole idea better than Mean Girls. And I'm talking the original Mean Girls, the one with Lindsay Lohan and Rachel McAdams. So when you watch that movie, there is so much going on, and so much going on in a way of there's a lot of different high school experiences happening within that movie. I mean, usually we're focusing so much on the Regina George of it all, and we're focusing so much on the Lindsay Lohan of it all, who's Katie. And so much of that high school experience of even like you look at someone like Katie from the premise of the movie, when she first meets Regina, it's very innocent from her point of view, where it's just like, oh, okay, so she's like the queen bee. Oh, she's talking to me, that type of thing. But then obviously things take a turn because Regina is Regina. But what's also interesting is you take a look at it from Katie's point of view and how all of a sudden it turns into this thing of, oh, we're going to play Regina because we're going to try to take him down from the inside out. But then what ends up happening is Katie changes. She's the one that ends up going in. And so she thinks she's going in with this one idea that it's like, oh, I'm going to take Regina down from the inside out and so on and so forth, like one of those crazy high school plans. But then what ends up actually happening is she realizes she likes the ecosystem of that group. She likes the idea of being like, quote unquote, the queen bee. And then what's interesting is what happens. She waters down, she changes, she reduces everything about who Katie is, everything that Lindsay Lohan's character was portraying in the movie completely changes. It completely changes to the point the people that actually liked Katie for Katie can't stand her anymore. Why? Because she's basically become a cheap version of Regina George. And so that's the thing that's so interesting, because even the guy that she's supposed to have a romantic connection with, he's like, you're Regina. And then you look at the friends that she had prior and they're like, you're Regina. And I think that is a universal experience that we all have, that even by the end of the movie, you start to realize if you have to change for someone, then most likely that someone's not for you. Whether that's dating, whether that's friendships, if you have to change a fundamental part of who you are so that you can fit with someone, that person's probably not for you. And honestly, you can only maintain changing for someone or really holding up a particular persona for so long until eventually it's almost like it causes you anguish. It causes you pain because it's not really an authentic part of who you are. One of the things I think about that I even bring back to my own life is I think about being young and trying to date and trying to get different guys' attention. And there's one moment in my life where I was about like 16 or 17 years old. And I remember I had met this guy and I really liked him. And what is a normal thing that you do when you meet a guy or when you meet someone and you really like them and it's like, what do you do? And I'm not talking about stalking them on social media. I'm talking about like you're trying to build a connection with them. So you try to find a common ground. In a lot of ways, the way I would form a connection with people is I'd always be like, what's your favorite movie? What's your favorite TV show? Because there was so many times people would say a movie or a TV show and I would have seen it. Like I would have known it. I would have been like, this is my in. I got it. Like this was like my quote unquote move. Whereas like, okay, if I can ask someone what their favorite movie or TV show is, I should be able to get an in with them and like we'll be good because I've seen a lot of like movies and TV shows. So of course, when I have my opportunity, I go up to the guy that I like. And for the sake of the story, I'm going to give him the name Tommy. I don't think I know a Tommy. So I go up and I go, hey, Tommy. And it's like, hi, Christina. And I'm trying to be as smooth as humanly possible. But I was also 16/17, so like not smooth at all. And next thing I know, that comes out, it's like, so what's your favorite like TV show? So at this point in time, I'm like, if he says Friends, I got this in the bag. If he goes with The Office, that's another solid answer. So I was like locked and ready to go. And all of a sudden he goes, oh, I've been really loving the show How I Met Your Mother. I'm like, I didn't know that show at all. I was totally taken back because, I feel like most people are usually like Friends, The Office. So he goes, How I Met Your Mother. And he goes, oh, have you seen it? And I'm like, no, I haven't. And at that point in time, I didn't really have any game. So I was like, oh, yeah, no, like I heard of it, but like, no, I haven't seen it. And he's like, oh, yeah, oh, it's a really good show. I was like, okay, crap. Like, I don't know what to say to him after this point in time. So you're 17. What is the realistic thing that you do in a situation like that? So you're like, okay, I didn't make a connection with Tommy. I don't watch the show that he watches. So what is the solution? Well, of course, at 17 years old, the solution is you go home and you try to binge watch How I Met Your Mother so that you would have something to talk to him about. Because that seems like the most rational thing to do instead of literally trying to make a connection on hobbies or literally anything else. But no, 17-year-old Christina, this was the way we were going to go. So I went home, I pulled up How I Met Your Mother. I did not realize there was 1,000,000 seasons. So I'm like, all right, I guess I'm not like binge watching this in like a weekend. I kid you not. I think there's like 9 seasons. And I remember looking at the seasons. There's 22 episodes per season or more. Yeah. And I was like, and I'm probably not going to be binge watching this in like one sitting. And so at that point, I was like, okay, well, at least just get started. All you have to do is just be, next time you see him, you could be like, oh, hey, I started to watch How I Met Your Mother, kind of go back to having that connection. So I sit down, I start watching the show. I'm going to tell you right now, I did not like it. Like I sat down and I was like, oh my God, this is like torture to me. Like I didn't enjoy it. I found it really annoying. I will say, now I'm going to give you a disclaimer. I did end up watching all 9 seasons and the show grew on me, but the first like several episodes were excruciating. Like for some reason, I didn't really like it. And then once I got into it and I really started to like it, then it was fine. And I remember sitting there and watching it and then there being like this moment thinking like, okay, like, is this worth it? Which don't we all have that moment where you're in the middle of doing something that you're like, this feels so stupid. And then you're like, is it worth it? Because you know that you're doing it in the attempt of like trying to make a connection with somebody or, like whatever the stupid thing is. And I'm like, yeah, is this worth trying to build some type of relationship or connection with Tommy? And then I think about it and, once again, 17. Yeah, it's worth it. So after I started watching the show, next time I saw Tommy, I'm going to try to work up having like my own in. And so finally there was like an extensive amount of time that had passed, maybe like a month or so. I finally had like built up the courage to be like, so How I Met Your Mother, like that's still your favorite show? And you want to know what this guy said to me? He goes, oh yeah, no, I don't really watch it anymore. That was after I had made myself sit through an extensive amount of time watching this show. And he's like, yeah, I kind of moved on. I couldn't believe it. Honestly, I look at that experience and I laugh at it. Like, because truth be told, Christina now, I wouldn't cater myself in that particular way to somebody. Now, if someone liked a show that I didn't like, that's totally fine. That's totally normal. But the old Christina probably in a lot of ways would have tried to like, it's one of those things. It's like you always want to be portrayed as like the perfect like person or partner. So you're like, we have to like all the same shows. In my opinion, one of the things about life that's so beautiful is I love when people have varying opinions, views, whatever the case is. Life is so boring when you're surrounded by people that are all the same. So it's so much more exciting when you're with somebody and it's like their favorite show is a show that you don't like, or maybe you guys only watch one show together that you both actually like. And it's funny because even like one of my closest friends, there's maybe like 1 or 2 shows that we both actually like, but for the most part, our idea of like TV shows and movies are vastly different. But once again, it also creates it to be like kind of like a fun conversation where it's like, so when I ask my friend, oh, what's going on in reality TV? And they're like, oh my God, this is so exciting. And, I'm not a reality TV person. So every once in a while when I find a reality TV show that like I like, for a long time, I really liked Love is Blind, which That show fell off. I'm sorry, but it did. Even that example, it's like I really enjoyed watching that show. So I would have a friend. We would talk about it. It would be so exciting. That's an instance where it's like I didn't have to change who I was. It's neat to see sometimes how things overlap and like evolve that way though too. But then you have these moments where I also want to caution you because there's always these instances where it's like you try to change yourself or you try to morph into something that's really not who you are, but more of this idea of what you think people want. And it's funny because in this episode, there's a lot of like TV shows and movie references just because like once again, when I was talking about the watered down apple juice, I just kind of kept getting all of these like illustrations in my head or all these different TV show like ideas in my mind. And one of them I was thinking about was Friends and like how there's the episode when Chandler is hanging out with like his boss and I think they're playing tennis and then they decide to do couples tennis. So then Chandler brings Monica and his boss brings his wife. And all of a sudden Monica starts to notice that Chandler is laughing very like inauthentically to all of his boss's jokes and then finds out that like he's losing whatever game they're playing, whether it's tennis or it's another game. And Monica gets to the point where it's like, who are you? Like, what is the, and like almost starts to like mock him or make fun of him. And so then he finally works up the courage where it's like, okay, I'm not going to laugh like at his jokes. And then by the end of the episode, it's like Monica realizes like, oh, actually, this works out better for us if you do pretend to laugh. So then they do start to pretend to laugh. See, but that's one of those episodes in the TV shows where I'm like, that is such an accurate experience because it kind of plays to like the office politics where it's like, okay, I want to be in good graces with my boss. So I'm morphing into this other thing. But then you find yourself in this route, like Chandler was in this route where it's like you created a version of yourself that's not real. So it's so painful, it's so excruciating, and it's exhausting because you're playing this part that's not even who you are. And that's one of those instances. I think it also goes back to personality type. There's some people that are okay with that. They're like, hey, I don't mind changing who I am to fill this role or to be this person. So using Chandler as an example to kind of even go into a broader topic of office politics, you could be asking yourself this question of, well, should I be open to diluting myself? Should I be open to kind of changing certain things? Because if I want to get to have certain positions, I mean, do I need to tolerate certain things? And honestly, what I would say is depending upon the culture of the company you're in, sometimes. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm not saying that you should be changing who you are, but it's also one of those things I think it can be very damaging to who you are as an individual when you start to play those games. It goes back to that idea of office politics. So it goes back to if you want to be liked, if you want to be accepted, if you want to have certain roles, sometimes you can't have an opinion. But I will also say there's some cultures you get into where they'll want you to be a quote unquote individualist. They'll want you to have an opinion. So it's also one of those moments of knowing what kind of culture you're in. But this is something that I think is really important to be aware of is if you are in a culture where they are promoting the idea of everybody having similar personalities, or you have to kind of play these office politics to really kind of get ahead, which office politics are really everywhere, if we're honest with ourselves, but more in the aspect of changing who you are to fill a particular role. All I'm going to say is as you start to change yourself to fill certain roles, don't be surprised if your identity becomes solely about what you do. It won't be about who you are as an individual, because as you change things to try to really fill this role, and as you realize your identity is so involved in that role, this is when your company has more power over you than you have power over you. It's funny because I wasn't even planning on sharing this particular story, but there was a moment in my life that was, I would say this was a very eye-opening experience for me. But when I was 22, I was a supervisor in a retail store. And I was in management and it was one of my first managerial roles. And I remember being at the store. There was a bunch of us. There was like maybe like 10 or 12 of us. And we were all opening the store. We're in a group team huddle. And all of a sudden, we see two people walking into the store. This is before we open. They're walking in with bags. None of us know who they are. They come to the doors. They open up the doors. And the store manager walks over, starts talking to them, and they head right upstairs. And then we see someone else walking in, and this is a district person that all of us were familiar with. So we're like, oh, and for the sake of the story, his name will be Mike. So we see Mike come walk in and we're all like, oh, hey, Mike. And then he heads upstairs and the store manager comes over to us. And one of the receiving managers goes, who is that? Who were the two women that had come in before Mike? And he goes, those are two corporate HR people, which at 22, I was like, oh, cool. HR people, like not a big deal. I didn't realize at 22, when you have never seen two HR people, like you've never seen them before, but they just show up, that's not good. That's just not good. Maybe like 15 minutes pass. We all disperse. I see Mike come downstairs. I see him stop at the store manager. He's talking to him. He is devastated, utterly devastated. And he walks out of the building. They had fired, let go, whatever the word is that you want to say. They let him go after he had spent years, I mean decades, working at this store because they had to do a financial reorganization of funds and they couldn't afford him, so they let him go. And I remember after him being let go, after him leaving, and I had talked to the store manager and he was like, so my store manager, he was the most unshakable person there was. Very rarely was he ever really kind of concerned. After Mike had gotten walked out of the building and they were like, make sure you drop off your company car and all these different things. And I just remember the store manager looking at me and he just was like, wow, he was truly shocked. And that was an instance to me that even though Mike had worked here for years, I mean decades, every time they did a restructuring, every time they were like, there's more work that we need you to do, Mike was the first one to take it on. So in this instance, Mike is this super important person. He has catered and changed everything in his life so that he could fulfill this role. And this company just let him go. They let him go like he was nothing. And I just remember standing there in complete shock, even with the store manager being there and being like, oh my God, like if they could do that to Mike, they could do that to me. Like what makes me so special? So this is one of those instances where I would say, listen, it's great to have ambitions. It's great to want to have certain roles. And there's some companies where it's better to work at than others. But when you have to change fundamental parts of yourself and you have to put up with almost like borderline abuse in order to have or maintain those roles, I'm telling you from experience, it's not worth it. It's not worth it to watch people that you care about get walked out of buildings as they say like, oh, like it's nothing personal. And honestly, in a way, it's not anything personal, but it's also business won't value you the way you can value you. So at the end of the day, when I think about Mike and how he had made all these changes, what I would really urge is for you to ask this question to yourself. Is it worth it? Kind of just like how I was telling the story about watching How I Met Your Mother for Tommy and how there was this moment in time where I'm like, okay, this is not something I naturally want to do. And there's moments in life when you do things that you don't want to do. We're talking about this in the concept of more of conforming or watering down or, weakening, reducing who you are as a person so that you could pursue certain things. And this is where in an instance, when I look at Mike's life, it's like, or his career within this retail company. And I just think, was it worth it? So if there's moments in your life where you're sacrificing maybe family events, personal events, so that you can obtain a career, but if you lost that career tomorrow, was it worth it? Now, if your answer is yes, that's great. That's fine. Then honestly, maybe you're not conforming. Maybe you're doing what it takes to have that role. But if the answer somewhere is no, it's not worth it, then you need to look back at yourself and wonder if there's somewhere along the way that you've started to dilute who you are. Because whether we want to admit it or not, we dilute ourselves. We dilute ourselves to be more tolerable for others. That is just a natural thing we've all done at some point in life, whether you're in your 20s, 30s, whatever. We all have our moments. It is a universal experience, but the saddest part within all of it is the more that you get used to diluting yourself, the more that you are open to the potential of forgetting parts of who you are because they get lost and we lose touch with who we are. Next thing you know, it's almost like you have to go on this journey of rediscovering who you are because it's almost like you've allowed so many other voices to come in and to change perspectives or change fundamentals that were never meant to be changed. So, we started this whole conversation on watered down apple juice. We've talked about diluting ourselves, changing who we are, and all these different ideas. I want to lean into the part of the conversation where we don't dilute or change ourselves, but instead we are 100% embraced by who we are. And so this brings me to some dating advice my older sister gave me, which if you guys haven't checked out my interview with my older sister, Ashley, go check that out. So I had gotten some dating advice from my older sister. I think I was in high school when she gave it to me. And I remember randomly, one day when I must have been saying something like, I'm never going to find somebody or something like that. And I remember this was her iconic dating advice, one-liner. She would always say, there's a someone for everyone. When you're younger and you're growing up and you're kind of not really like thinking much about it, but then all of a sudden it's almost like you get to these points in time where you're like, oh my God, this is like really true. Like a perfect example is I think about the show Friends, and like you could look at certain characters like Phoebe and you could be like, oh my God, she's so like eccentric. Is she going to find someone that's going to like mesh really well with her? It's almost like you start to wonder like, what would the perfect partner for someone like a Phoebe look like? But then all of a sudden, what happens? They start to introduce the love interest for Phoebe. And that's where, once again, you start to look at this idea. There is a someone for everyone. Like there is a complementary component for every person. I believe there's a complementary component for every person out there. It's just more if you're open to them. So like a perfect example is I think about Phoebe and how you see her dating all these different guys, but it's not until the character Mike comes along that you're like, oh wow, like he's really complimentary to her. Even like the episode where Phoebe goes and she marries Mike, and she has to change her name. Instead, she changes her name to Princess Consuelo's Banana Hammock. And instead of Mike getting like super mad and all this stuff, he changes his name to Crap Bag. And I think that's hysterical because it's almost like he knew how to talk to her, because it goes back to that idea of there's a someone for everyone. So he knew the best way to talk to her. He knew how to get onto her level. And it was like, well, if that's the name that you're going to have, I want everyone to call me Crap Bag. And it was like, okay, I see where you're coming from. And you can even say the same thing for when you look at Monica. I mean, you look at Monica and it's like, oh my goodness, she's obsessed with cleaning and she loves to cook and all these things. Even the one episode where everyone gets to the point where they're like, Monica, you are high maintenance. And then finally she's looking at Chandler and she goes, well, do you think I'm high maintenance? And of course, Chandler's like, well, yeah. And then I love how Monica's like, well, you're dead to me then too. But then what happens? I love how when Chandler comes in and he says this line of where it's like, well, I like maintaining you. And it's so funny because you could be thinking like, well, that sounds really bizarre. But it's this moment of where it's like, okay, Monica's always been told she's high maintenance or she's a lot or whatever the case is. But then you have this guy come in, you have Chandler come in, and it's like, no, I like to maintain you. Like, I like to think I'm good at that. Kind of like he can be what she needs. Like, he can be that rock for her. And that's why I always think my sister's dating advice was always so good, because it's true. There's a someone for everyone. I would like to say there's a complimentary person for everyone. Whether you choose to be with that person is a different story, but there is a complimentary person. And so even to round out this whole idea, I even think about this one last movie called He's Just Not That Into You, which great movie, so many great celebrities in this movie. But there was one quote, like there was one line from this movie that I love more than anything else. So it's this character, Alex. He tells Gigi. And so Alex is played by Justin Long and Gigi is played by Jennifer Goodwin. So the quote goes, so Alex says to Gigi, if a guy doesn't call or treat you well, he's simply not that into you. You are likely the rule, not the exception. So this is like the most iconic line out of like the whole movie. Like this line is basically the whole point of the movie. And it's so funny because Gigi's character, she's like boy crazy, changes everything about herself to try to get a guy to like her. And as soon as Alex's character comes into her life in a very neutral way, and when he says this, it's almost like it's eye-opening to her. And then she brings it to her friends and all of a sudden they're all like, oh my God, because they start to see it in their life where they're like, every time a guy wasn't treating us well, it's like, we're the rule, we're not the exception. I think that quote is such a perfect representation of life, where if someone's not treating you well, if you're not getting the friend groups that you want, or whatever the case may be, it's like you're the rule. You're not the exception. But what is so unique is when you find the right person, whether it's dating, whether you find the right friends, you find the right job, somehow you can become the exception. And I think that is what is so cool about this whole concept. So where you might be trying to dilute who you are, thinking, I'm not that special, I'm not that worthy. And then all of a sudden, when you find the right person, it's amazing how the places where you once would have like had insecurities, those are the things people love about you. And ultimately, if you have to dilute or change a part of yourself for friends or a partner, do they really like you? Like ultimately, fundamentally, do they really like who you are? I think about that question a lot, like, do they even like you? Because there's been moments in my life where people will say things to me like, stop being so sarcastic. I'm a very sarcastic person by nature. Like that's the way I like to like joke and mess around. And so when someone would ever say to me like, stop being so sarcastic, I'm like, then ultimately, fundamentally, you don't like the most authentic version of who I really am, because to put a stop to that means that you don't really know fully who I am. And one of my favorite things after doing extensive research in marketing is one of my favorite lines people will say all the time about marketing is they're like, good marketing People will either love you or they'll hate you. There's no in between. So to live in this world of where you're trying to make everybody like you, it's actually doing you such a disservice because, I mean, you look at someone like Taylor Swift, people either love her or they hate her. There is no in between. I think about Justin Bieber and I'm like, even the height of his popularity, people either loved him or they hated him. There was no in between. And then it's so funny because I even think about recently on TikTok, there was one TikTok creator. She blew up from doing this little Alexander Hamilton sketch where she was singing a song from Hamilton, the musical, and she was like climbing out of a window and she was dressed in like, I don't know, 1800s like clothes. She put a fake beard on and just all these things. And her video went viral. It launched her into this whole realm of like popularity. Next thing you know, she's dressing up as Dr. Seuss's The Lorax, and she has built a huge community of people on TikTok. But the way she's done that is by being 100% who she is. So I urge you to live 100% authentically to who you are. I know a lot of times you want to have the popular friends and different things, but at the end of the day, you want to have the right friends. You don't want to have the popular friends because the popular ones, it's like Mean Girls. They'll drop you when you're not convenient to them. But if you have the right friends, they'll stick through life with you. But I will also say, change is a good thing. Change is inevitable. But changing to dilute yourself, that's the thing you want to be aware of. So I would say, think of it this way. Change is good, but to change to be accepted is the biggest lie you'll be sold. So let's move into my favorite part of this whole episode, trying to summarize this whole episode into a single phrase, an episode in a phrase. So our episode in a phrase this week is diluting does nothing. All right, so let's move into our sticky thoughts, thoughts that stick. 1, don't be watered down apple juice. 2, be you. It's the only maintainable version of you there is. 3, diluting does nothing. 4, change is good, but changing to be accepted is a lie. So thank you so much for hanging out with me, and thank you for letting me talk about a silly little topic about watered down apple juice, because nobody wants watered down apple juice. Anyways, but genuinely, thank you for talking with me all about not diluting yourself. So I would love to connect with you, and you can connect with us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Let's Unravel Pod. If you enjoyed this week's episode or the podcast show in general, please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and you can now leave reviews on Facebook, and you can find us at Let's Unravel Podcast. Your 5-star ratings and comments go a very long way in helping boost the algorithm. You can help us reach new listeners and become someone else's new favorite show. Also, don't forget to hit subscribe or follow wherever you might listen to stay up to date on all new episodes. We release new episodes every single Thursday, and you are not going to want to miss a thing. Well, I guess it's that time of the episode to tell you my hot take. Do I think Die Hard is a Christmas movie? Yeah, I do. I mean, it takes place on Christmas Eve. How could it not be considered a Christmas movie? Now, yes, it's action-packed. Yes, things blow up. But don't you want to see that in a Christmas movie? I mean, dare I even say they have Christmas decorations everywhere. You know, I've seen Christmas movies with less enthusiasm than the enthusiasm that's in Die Hard. You know what? Die Hard's a Christmas movie. It's got to be part of the Christmas rotation. I want to watch The Grinch, It's a Wonderful Life, Elf, and Die Hard. There you go. Perfect Christmas movie rotation right there. Let me know your thoughts and comments down below. Anyways, that's all. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you next week with another new episode. Talk to you later. Bye.